Hey, are you retired? Are you wondering what you're going to do with your time? I know the feeling, trust me. And I also know a wonderful solution. Our guest today is going to help you with that solution. What do you do if you have an awful lot of time? Can you maybe write a book? My name is Vin Dacquino. Our next guest is Ira Berkowitz. Ira, let's talk writing, buddy.
Hey, Vinny, how are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Pleasure. We have a history. We go back.
We do.
We won't mention how many years we go back.
Too many years.
Yeah, that's true, because we're only in our 20s or 30s. But in reality, you've been very busy these past few years. Tell me a little bit, what has Ira been up to?
Well, I've become the poster boy for life after retirement.
Oh, that's a good thing.
I spent my entire career in advertising. I ran divisions for Ogilvy and Mather and Gray Advertising, and then one day I'm at a meeting and I'm looking at the conference room, and everybody's about 13 years old.
Oh, I know that feeling.
They don't understand me, I don't understand them, and it was time to go home.
Yep.
After a few months of sitting home doing absolutely nothing, my wife said to me, "So what do you plan to do with the rest of your life?" She said, "You have no hobbies, you have no interests, you have nothing." And she was right.
Yeah. Dangerous.
And
it's dangerous.
yeah, and I said, "What do you have in mind?" And she said, I think you should write." And I looked at her quizzically, and I said, "Write what?" And she said, "Fiction." And my response was, the only fiction I had ever written was marketing plans. She said, "No, I think you could write." She's a very smart lady. And since I had nothing else going on, I figured I'd give it a shot. But I had never taken a creative writing course. But then again, I had never taken any marketing courses, and there I was in advertising.
Very successful.
And I figured, how hard could it be? Well, it was hard. But what I did was I started rereading books by authors I admired to see how they did it.
Who were some of those authors that you turned to?
William Kennedy, who
yeah.
wrote the Albany trilogy.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you had James Lee Burke, the guy who wrote Last Exit to Brooklyn, Hubert Selby Jr.,
Wow.
Robert Parker, and I.B. Singer, who's one of my favorite authors. And, I mean, I didn't know how long a chapter should be. How do you develop character, plot, setting, all of that?
Now, did those books help you with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So you looked at those stories with a creative eye. Look at them, try to see what's making this work.
Yeah.
You know, there's one thing I used to say to my students. I would tell them, think about this. Steinbeck writes a 117-page book,
Right.
The Pearl.
Right.
And it is magic. Worked for years. High school students all over the world read this book. It's a masterpiece. What in the world did Steinbeck do in those 117 pages that we aren't doing? How do you make a book work?
You make it work by, I guess the best for me. I can't speak
and that's
for
what it has
others.
to be.
Yeah. I can't speak
What
for
works
others.
for you?
For me, it's about character
Good.
and story.
Good. Now, so, did you have any character or story in mind?
No,
No.
absolutely not.
So you were like, where do I go from here?
Exactly.
Now, did any of those books give you any ideas?
No,
No.
same thing.
You saw the structure, you saw what was making them work, but it wasn't triggering anything in your head. Where did the trigger come?
It's interesting. The creative process, and it's something that I've never really had to think about before,
No.
but it's something I think
And
about.
it is a process.
It really is. And quite often, it's magic.
Yep.
For me, at any rate.
And for me.
I remember when I worked in the advertising business, I would do these huge programs for American Express or whoever my client was. And they happened because I had done the work. Okay?
That is true.
And because you had done the work, it triggers something. I've always been a voracious reader. Ever since I was, as long as I can remember, I've
Ira,
read.
I'm sure I've said this to your children when they were in my classes
Right.
years ago. Readers are leaders. Reading leads to writing.
Absolutely, and I think it's an inexorable process where if you're a reader, you can write. Now, whether you're going to be a good writer or not,
Yeah.
that's another story. But with me, I wrote a book, and it was okay. It got 50 rejections. I sent it out to agents, and it went nowhere. But I got 2 that were encouraging. And that kept me going. I figured, well, maybe, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
And then one night, my wife and I are watching television, and I saw a DirecTV commercial, and I heard the name Steeg. And
S-T-E-I-G.
S-T-E-E-G.
S-T-E-E-G, okay.
And I just turned to her, and I said, what a great name.
Oh, wow.
And she said, who is he? And my entire book was there. And
So that name
that name triggered a book.
just turned into a book.
Right, but there were some problems. It was what it was the book was Family Matters, and
That's the title of the book.
that was
Family
the title
Matters.
of the book. It was the first in the Jackson Steeg mystery series. By the way, only very few people call him Jackson. I mean, it's Steeg. Everybody calls him Steeg.
Okay.
He was a cop. I knew nothing about cops.
Wow.
And police procedurals bored the hell out of me.
Yeah.
So I wasn't about to write that. So I suspended him. He didn't have to be a cop anymore.
There you go. Well,
And
it's interesting. I had several episodes ago.
Yep.
I had the former police chief of Yonkers on the show, who's writing murder mysteries.
Is he really?
And that's one of the things he said. He said, I'm not sure how people can write a murder mystery when they don't know anything about murder scenes. They don't know anything about the legal system. It gets tricky. You need to know. Before you said something that was key. You said something about pre-writing. There's
Right.
things that you have to do beforehand.
Yeah, there are. I mean, part of it comes of living a life.
Yeah.
I mean, you read newspapers, you see TV shows, you're aware,
Yep.
and you absorb all this
And
stuff.
you have to know how to use that information.
But you have to know how to use it in a way that gives the reader permission to believe. That's the key.
That's great.
If you overload the reader with technical, Form 1033, that's boring.
Yep.
For me, at least. But if you can give him permission to believe at the outset, I think you're going to be okay.
And you have to give your character permission to breathe, to be alive.
No
It's
question.
very interesting to me that you said that when you saw the name of a character, your book began to come to life.
Absolutely.
That's your character coming to you. There's so many authors who don't allow their characters to write the story. Authors don't write stories, their characters do. If you give them permission to do whatever it is they need to do and be patient, the story comes. Well, you've written, 4 of them, right?
I've written 4 books.
4 books.
And I've been very fortunate. The first one, Family Matters, was a top 10 summer pick by USA Today.
Wow.
So that was great. And it won a Washington Irving Award. The second one, Old Flame, same thing, won a starred reviews. The reviews have been great. Again, another Washington Irving. The third one, Sinner's Ball, won a Seamus Award, which was named Best Crime Fiction Novel of the Year. And I'm working on a 4th now. I'm not working on it. I have it out there. Just published, Black Angel.
Wow.
And
So you're cooking.
And it's really about this cop family, and they live in Hell's Kitchen, and
So this is a series?
it's a series.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But to your point, you mentioned something. The characters write the story
Yeah.
for it. You're absolutely right. You live these characters. You dream these characters. They talk to you, and as you're typing, you hear them.
Yep.
And I hear them, and quite often I'm just sitting there writing what they say.
Yeah. Jimmy James in my Kiss the Candy Days Goodbye.
Right.
You could ask me any questions you want about Jimmy.
Right.
Would Jimmy do this? Would Jimmy do that? Would Jimmy say this? Would Jimmy...
Right.
I can answer any of those questions because Jimmy isn't a character. He's a kid. He's as much of a kid as my own kids.
I have a friend who's a very good writer, just a wonderful writer. And this is going to sound crazy, but after I die, what's going to happen to these people? And it's something I think about.
Yeah.
Because you create them. They're there. They're
people.
real people.
Yep. Yep.
And I'll tell you this. In my first book, Family Matters, I had a character. His name was John Herkimer. He was a homeless guy. He was a former professor of English literature.
Wow.
And he lived in a packing crate. And he was irascible. He was a drug addict. And I loved him. Loved him.
Yeah.
And as I'm sitting there typing, I see him dead. And I got up from the computer and I walked away. I wasn't going to write it.
Wow.
And it took 2 or 3 days for me to get back, and I kept, I mean, it sounds crazy. I know it does. Until I finally sat down. I couldn't write. And then I sat down and I wrote the scene where he died.
You have to let him go, just like in real life.
And I cried. I
have?
sat at that computer and tears are coming down, and I said, I'm losing my mind.
Yep.
Because I had never
Yeah.
done this before.
That's another thing that I say to writers. You know, I teach a course in writing for Westchester Community College. And writers come to me and I say to them, understand, you don't write a book. You work a book. You get involved. And it's part of your
Absolutely.
world. You create this world. These are people. They're real people. And when they get hurt, you get hurt.
That's right.
And that's how you work a book. You don't sit down and just create a story. It's not a story, it's a life.
Which is why I never outline.
That's great. I don't either.
I never outline. I let the characters take me where they want me to go.
Now, do you have a general idea of where you're going, though?
General idea.
I do the same thing.
And quite
That's funny.
often, I'm surprised.
Yeah.
In fact,
do
I'm
the
always
same thing.
surprised.
Writers say, do you know exactly how your book's going to end?
Never.
I say, absolutely not.
No.
And I always say this. This is one of my golden rules of writing. Never write your first page first. Always write your first page last. And they say, wait, what? By the time you get to the end of the book and you've taken that journey with your characters and you get to that end, you know things you didn't know on page 1. Now go back to page 1, knowing what you do know now.
Well, I in my first book, I did write the first page, the first chapter. As it turned out, that became chapter 36.
There you go.
And chapter
Wow,
36 became the first chapter.
Wow.
In this book, Black Angel, the new book that's out now, I wrote the first chapter first, and it stayed. And it's based on something I saw. Can I talk about it for a minute?
Go ahead. Absolutely, please.
We were in Boston, and there were a lot of homeless people in Boston. I mean, it just
As there are in New York.
worse. I mean,
Wow,
it's
really?
like New York in the 70s and 80s. It's like Times Square. It's awful. Anyway, we're walking along, and I see this girl, young woman, perhaps she's in her 20s, and she's wearing a wedding dress and a veil.
Wow.
And it's ripped and it's tattered, and her eyes were just luminescent with madness. She was insane. And she's standing there in the street and she's raving. And it was one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever seen.
Wow.
And that image, she stayed with me.
Yeah.
And I had to write the book. And
Fiction
Yep.
is often created from nonfiction.
yeah, oh sure.
Life.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the best ways to be a writer is to open your eyes, your nose, your ears, your heart. You've got to be an observer. Writers observe. Life is out there. And sometimes it's a matter of recreating. Sometimes I love the fact that your book began with a character's name, because what we were witnessing is the birth. That's what it is.
Absolutely.
Inception. That
Right.
was Inception. And I just love that idea. We talked once before about writers have different styles. Sometimes a writer says, hey, you create a great character and I'll read that book. I don't care what the character does. If I love or hate that character, I'm with you. Others say, no. Setting. If you create a setting that I could feel, whether it's a farm or a city, doesn't matter. Create a setting that I can feel and smell and taste. Others say, no. Plot. You have to create a plot. You have to create a storyline. Something that takes you from one page to the next, to the next, to the next. Others say, no, tone. Look at Edgar Allan Poe. He was a master of tone. Created such a somber, scary, macabre world that you were there. Plot, character, setting, theme. Create a theme that I understand. Write about something I care about. Where are you, Ira?
It's all of it.
All of it.
And-
Absolutely.
and-
a wonderful blend of all of it.
That achieving that balance is magic. And here's the thing. You're never quite there. A book is never finished. A painting is never finished. A sculpture is never finished. I edit constantly. I'll write my goal is 1,000 words a day. And I write the 1,000 words. The next morning I read them, I edit them, and then I'll write another 1,000. But then I'll go back.
Wow.
And then I edit, and then that word. The first book I wrote, Family Matters, took 3.5 months. The last book, Black Angel, that's out now, took about 9 months. And the reason for that is I find that I labor over each sentence. If there are times I'll sit there and it'll take me an hour or two to get the sentence right.
One of my favorite quotes was Ray Bradbury.
One of my favorite writers.
Oh, wonderful. Someone said to him, how do you know when a book is finished? Ray Bradbury said, when I can read from the first word to the last without making any changes. Now, when I say that to writers, they go, I don't think I could do that. I still can't do that. I can't read my books.
That's exactly right.
They're already published. I can't read them without going from the beginning to the end without wanting to make changes.
Yeah, I can't believe I said that.
But
there's a better way to do that.
In Italian, there's a word, basta.
Right, enough.
Which means enough.
Yeah.
And there has to be a point where you have to say, basta.
Well, we both know writers that'll take 10 years to write a book. They'll write a book every 10 years.
Yeah.
And I think the problem is they're afraid to let it go. They just don't want to put it out in the world.
But even a statement that you just made, where you said you write like 1,000 words a day, that makes some writers crazy. I had a guest on a couple episodes ago. Said, how do these people do where they sit down and they go, okay, I wrote 1,000 words, I'm done today. And writers have styles.
Correct.
They have profiles. Some writers write first thing in the morning. Some write late at night.
Right.
I write middle of the night.
Right.
Simple reason. I love my wife.
Right.
When she's sleeping, I get a whole lot more done.
Sure.
And that's the way it is.
Yep.
Although the cats, one goes on one side, one goes on the other, they drive me nuts trying to walk across the keyboard. But middle of the night works for me. When do you write?
I write in the morning.
When you first get up?
Yep, when I first get up.
Okay.
That's when I write. And then I repeat it the next, I do it again the next morning and the next morning and the
Now,
next.
this is going to sound weird to you, but are there favorite clothes you wear when you write? You write in your pajamas? Or?
No, just shorts and a T-shirt.
It's funny. A wonderful writer, Patricia Riley Giff. She writes children's books. I said to her, hey, you wear anything special when you write? Kidding. She said, absolutely. My nightgown. I said, really? She says, yes. She says, when I write, I want to be comfortable.
Exactly.
She said, so I get up. My children have to be to school by 8. She said, I get up 5:30, and I write from like about 5:30, 6 o'clock to about 7:30, and then I tend to my chores.
Right.
And people do have little slots. And I've also found that some writers who get writer's block, one of the things I recommended to them, stop writing where you're writing. Find a new place to write. Find a new time slot to write in. And it makes a difference. Did you ever try writing anytime beside the morning?
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Doesn't
as well.
work.
Yeah, because we're all creatures of habit.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And not everybody's the same. You know, some writers try to find the magic formula. Magic formula lies within you.
You know, it's interesting. I had somebody came up to me one day and said, I'd like to buy you lunch. I said, sure, why?
Sure.
But what do you want to do? He said, I want to talk to you. I said, about what? He said, I read your books. They're great. They're terrific. He said, I want you to teach me how to write a book.
Whoa.
Over lunch.
Yeah.
So I said,
no
yeah,
problem.
Yeah, we can do this. I mean, but most people, I didn't realize it. I never realized what went into this and the debt you owe to the reader. Mm-hmm. In my first book, as I said, 3.5 months. After that, whoa, I mean, it better be good.
Do you know Sybil Ludington, The Call to Arms?
Sure.
It took me 3.5 years.
I can understand that.
That happens to be nonfiction, but you have to get it right. You have to feel that it's right.
Did you ever have writer's block, Vinny?
I have had writer's block. And you know how I solve it? I read. I pick up a book and I start reading. And after 3 or 4 pages, I go, procrastinating. And I put it down.
Right.
And then I go back to the writing. And there's several ways of getting out of writer's block. But what I truly believe now is sometimes writer's block is your character taking a break. And
or your character saying, I don't want to go where you're taking me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not listening.
That's right.
You're not listening. So
exactly.
you have to listen to what your character says.
Yeah.
That's what I say. You don't write a book. Sometimes you're dictated to.
It's automatic writing.
Yes, automatic. And I mean, I remember times when I would sit down after supper and I'd be writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. My wife would say, you need to take a shower before you go to work. I go, what time is it?
Right.
6 o'clock in the morning. And it's time to get up, you know? But when it takes you over, you know you're there.
But let me ask you this. When it happens, is it not the greatest feeling in the world?
You know, I equate it to that fisherman who goes out there and catches the biggest trout of his entire life, the one he's always dreamed of. What does he do after that? Goes after again. Goes back again.
Right.
Can't keep him away from the shore after it's happened. That's what happens to writers.
Amos Oz had the best line about writer's block. He was on Charlie Rose, and Rose asked him about that. He asked him his process. And he said, I'm a shopkeeper. Every day I go down, I arrange the merchandise, and I wait for customers to come. Some days they come, some days they don't. When they don't, it's a very bad day.
Yeah.
And when they do, it's a wonderful day.
Yeah. And sometimes that's right. And we have to always remember writing is a process. It's a process. And sometimes you have to go through that process very carefully. You can't just expect to walk up to your computer and write a bestseller in one afternoon or during a lunch period. It's not going to happen. All right. I need to know all names of your 4 books.
Okay. The first one is Family Matters.
Family Matters.
Second, Old Flame.
Old Flame. Now, is this about an old flame?
This is about Stieg's old flame, his ex-wife.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Third is Sinner's Ball. Stieg has a little friend, a girl.
Uh-oh.
She's a latchkey kid, Dee Santos, and he takes care of her. And she has a boyfriend, a little boyfriend, and her boyfriend has a very difficult life. And all of these books are about the powerless.
People in trouble.
More than that, these are about the powerless in our society, and that's who Stieg cares about. the people, and he cares about crimes that the law simply can't or won't address. And these crimes are committed against these people at the lower end of the socioeconomic scale. And that's Stieg's ethos. So the fourth book and the third book, so that's Sinner's Ball, and then the fourth book is Black Angel.
So often when writers write,
Yep.
they're trying to say what they really feel. They're trying to get inside and introduce the world to something they might not otherwise see. Tell me about Ira's world. What do you need us to understand through your characters, through your books?
The world that I've created, that Stieg and the other characters inhabit, is not a pretty place. It can be a very, very unfair place. There are those who are privileged, and there are those who are not quite so privileged. And there is a celestial thumb on the scale. And Stieg can't abide that. He cannot abide that. And he aims to fix it. And he does. He aims to balance the scales.
So here's my big question to you.
Yep.
Is book 5 going to answer every question we have about Stieg?
No,
world?
not at all. It's
Will
going to
there be
raise more
book
questions.
6 and 7 and 8, 9 and 10?
Absolutely.
Oh, you're just going to keep going?
I'll write Stieg until I can no longer put my little bony fingers on those computer keys. Yeah.
Well, that sounds absolutely wonderful. I like what you're doing. I like the fact that you have taken your life and instead of saying it's time for the pasture, you've created new pastures. And you've helped us to see what we need to see.
It keeps you happy.
Keeps you happy. Well, it certainly has been an amazing pleasure
Thank
to
you,
have you
Vinny.
here. How do we get your books?
You can buy them on Amazon. You can get them at bookstores. You can get them in the library. And the latest one is an ebook only. So just go to Amazon.com and you can order it. And I think you'll enjoy it.
But your early ones we can get.
Oh, yeah.
They're all available.
Yep.
Well, I cannot thank Ira enough for being with us. I cannot thank you enough for being with us. It has been our pleasure. Ira?